And welcome to a special edition of Littermedia Live. I'm Dan Ramey in studio with Austin Hill of Austin Hill Motorsports. We're going to talk about this young man and what is ahead for him, especially this weekend at a place called Watkins Glen in New York. Details coming up in a bit, but first this from Kingston National Bank.
Wherever you are there for a reason. You shouldn't have to make a trip to the branch just to deposit a check. Skip the trip and use our mobile app to easily and securely deposit checks from your phone. Day or night, wherever you are, or whatever you're doing, download the Kingston National Bank Mobility app today.
Unless you were at the Adena graduation, you probably didn't know that Austin J. Hill was a name. And this is why I'm bringing it up. You raced at Sonoma Raceway here recently. Unfortunately, wasn't able to qualify for the race, but you were there. And they had to make a distinction between you and the other Austin Hill that has been racing successfully on the Xfinity circuit.
Yeah, so NASCAR contacted me actually when my name got registered because it was both Austin Hill and Austin Hill on the register list. So they're like, there's got to be a way to decipher it. And, I guess my middle name is Austin, and that's what I go by. So we just put my first initial as, I guess my middle name to say, just so that they could decipher it because, NASCAR does all these online betting things as well. So it wasn't even just for them. It was for the online betting sites and things, too, because if they didn't have the number of the car on there, they couldn't decipher which Austin Hill it was.
Right.
So...
Well, here he is, 18 years old now, and here not long ago, you weren't even allowed to drive on the state roadways, but you were on courses.
Yeah. Realistically, I started racing cars when I was 13 and a half, with the Pro Series a little bit. But, I couldn't drive for another 2.5 years actually on the road pretty much. So, it's kind of weird, you'd go race all weekend, going 150 mile an hour, winning races, but you couldn't drive on the regular road.
Yeah. And I've often wondered this, and I've never asked one of the NASCAR drivers that I've talked to in the past about how do you transition? You're going like crazy on a Sunday or in your case, a Saturday, and then you have to go street drive and get home safely at a speed that's not going to create a ticket.
Yeah, my biggest thing is cruise control. I guess I always get in the car and I set it. That way I don't have to worry about it because, when you're used to putting, the pedal to the floor, I guess speed gets away from you pretty quick. So cruise control is my favorite option, I guess, on a car.
Yeah, we don't want to name names, but there have been drivers who have been caught like 85 and a 35 and that sort of thing. But and you don't have to be a professional driver to do that. There are some people who just break the law.
Yeah.
But that's all part of the gig. You want to go fast, right?
Yeah. The name of the game is going fast and getting to from point A to point B the fastest you can. So, sometimes if you're not paying attention, it gets away from you.
There's a lot of physics involved in this, isn't there?
Yeah. You go to a NASCAR race and, you see them lift the hood up and things and you wonder what they're doing. And it's just they're changing little things on the car, but they make the biggest impact. Sometimes the smallest changes on these cars can make the biggest impact. Just because of how big the cars truly are, it doesn't take as much as you think to change them. But then, there's some things that it does take a lot to change to get what you need.
Yeah, I know for a lot of guys and gals who have raced as well, it started with, I just want to get from here to there before you do. We had that on the playground. Where did it start for you? Did it go with go-karts? Was it motorbikes, or where did it start for you?
So I started in quarter midgets, which is a quarter of a sprint car, is where it gets its name, because my dad started in sprint cars. So when he started in sprint cars, obviously every kid kind of wants to follow their dad or mom, and I want to follow my dad. So he got me a quarter midget not that long after he got his first sprint car, and I started racing it, and we were doing good, but I just didn't like, I guess, ovals as much back then. But we transitioned into go-karts just because there was more competition in it. It seemed like for my age group at least. We did really well in those, but then we decided to switch to road course go-karts, and we did really well. So, we did that for a couple years. We had the final full season that we did with go-karts. We won 44 races, 13 championships, and won 75% of the races we entered. So at that point, we kind of knew it was time to figure out what the next step was going to be. And so we ended up looking into like car racing and, which route I wanted to go. And at that time it was open wheel, because that's basically what a go-kart is. And from there we got into Formula cars, and we were doing really well, and we did it for a couple years. And then up till 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago, we were doing Formula cars, but now we've sort of switched all into sports cars. It's just where I guess the audience is anymore, and where you can get the backing to do it. So, that's sort of just where we've gone. And then now, getting NASCAR opportunities is definitely a big thing for not just myself, but, I guess the community, Ross County, I guess you don't hear of, smaller towns or smaller communities that much. So being able to bring some light to our community is something great, I guess, and I'm very happy that people are liking it and, being supportive with it.
One of the things that drivers have to learn is they have to become spokesmen as well. And that means you get to do what you do because of your sponsors. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, he's got sponsors on his shirt here today, but you have to try and remember everybody, say the right names and everything. So that adds to the challenge of I'm trying to qualify for a race as well.
Yeah, it definitely does. So, you go into anything with media, you try to give a shout out to a couple sponsors here, a couple sponsors there, and trying to remember all of them and not overlap, do this one twice, but not this one at all. It's definitely a challenge. And especially with like NASCAR and things, you're switching sponsors almost every weekend for a lot of these guys. So when you're doing that, it's hard for them to remember all of them just because of that.
But when they hand you a beverage after you've raced, you've made it, because that sponsor's paying for whatever it is you're ingesting on camera.
Yep, exactly.
We want to take a moment, because you were on vacation in July, and suddenly you get this phone call that you've got an opportunity from Joey Gase Racing or Motorsports to bring you into a race at Sonoma Raceway in California. Take us from there.
Yeah, so me and my family, we're sitting in an airport in Aruba on our family vacation for the year, and Joey texted me, and then he called me, and then I missed it because we were going through like TSA, I think it was, and then he texted me, and he said to give him a call, and I called him, and he was like, we really need a driver for this weekend coming up, and we'd really like you to do it. It's a road course, we just really need a driver for this weekend to get us through to the next one. And so, I talked to my dad, and I was like, we're flying home today. So, and it was Monday when we were flying home. So we got home like Tuesday at 2 a.m. And, that day we started working on all the logistics, trying to make sure we get everything right. Make sure we're going to have at least some sponsors for it, have a suit there. Cause NASCAR requires different suits. So I didn't have my suit yet for like this weekend. So I had to get just a generalized suit for that weekend. And we finally figured out all the logistics, got flights, hotels, all that. And it was like, okay, we can do this. So then, we fly out there, and, they had to have another team, North Carolina, get my seat insert from where I got my seat poured, a month or two before. And they weren't even going back to North Carolina because of the race before. So they had to have another team bring it for them. And then, I got fitted in the car, first time in the car, never been to California, let alone on that track before. So, got to learn the track, got to learn the car a little bit to better prepare us for Watkins Glen. And that's what Joey wanted to begin with. When we started doing good in practice, it was kind of like, okay, maybe we can do this. Like, maybe we can really get into this race. Cause, we had problems. Like the car just had a little bit of just bugs that we had to work out. So when it started going good, it was, we were happy about that. But then, qualifying, it just didn't go our way. We just had a problem with the setup. We decided to make a change, and it just didn't work out in our favor. But, that's what racing's all about. So
these cars are so similar. But like you say, if you have the right setup, man, you're going fast.
Yeah.
If one little thing's off, it really is a detriment to how you perform.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone has never gone to a NASCAR race and actually gone through the pits, you guys definitely need to go look at how NASCAR techs their cars. It's definitely, especially here in the recent years, it's definitely like progressed, and now it is very specific. You'll see this big tent and you'll think, what is that? And it's their scanner to make sure that your car is within its right parameters. And it's like everyone has to go through that and be in those parameters. But then, you come off that and you start making a little bit of changes to get a little bit quicker. And it's just, everyone kind of has to start from that same generalized area. So it's like everyone kind of starts from the same area, but it's who can make those change, like who's been there enough to have enough experience to know what changes need to be made right off the hit. And then that way they're not making the big changes too late.
And if you get a chance to go to a NASCAR race, go down and watch when they're getting ready to do inspection, because they've got the cars lined up and they're going to bring them through the garage area, and then they roll on out. Watching these guys standing around, because they're pushing the cars in, they don't start them up and roll them in. When they're pushing them in, they're like anxious. And then when they get out, they're so relieved.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that pressure.
Yeah. Joey was telling us that basically they can only not pass one time per weekend, or else there could be a penalty.
Yeah.
So it's, it's like the most nerve-wracking part of their weekend almost, just because, they might not know that they did something wrong. Like it could even be like a ride height thing. Like the car's just a little bit too low, and they didn't realize it when they left the shop, but the shock settled in the trailer and they didn't check it when it came off the trailer. And, it's like something like that could just ruin your weekend, because it could give you a penalty.
Now, those are things that are out of your control. But as we've seen in Days of Thunder, your crew chief is talking with you. Tell me what the car is doing so I can make the adjustments. What's that conversation like?
Yeah, so like in practice, you get just under an hour pretty much. So, we'll go. I like to go out there and try to get the most laps I can. Some drivers like to go out there and just set, a fast lap, say, okay, we're fifth, that's fine. But for me, I like going out there and just sort of getting, you learn things even if you're not, trying to go super fast on the track. You learn things just by being on that track. So I like trying to take up the most time I can out there. So I'll go out there 3 or 4 laps, and then I'll come in. If there needs to be a change, then just talk to my crew chief, and he'll say, what's the car need? And so if it's pushing a little bit in the front, I just tell him that, and then he knows what change he wants to make. I don't really have to worry about, I guess, telling him the exact change I need, because they're getting live photos and things, so they kind of see what the car's doing themselves. But then if you tell them the exact same thing that they're seeing in those photos, they kind of know what they need to change, because you're telling them what they're seeing already. So, the conversation with the crew chief is just like somewhat a little bit easy, just because they do it every day of their life somewhat, so they know what they're supposed to be doing. Everyone makes mistakes, so sometimes it's going to happen, but, they know what they're doing. So you just got to tell them how the car's reacting, how the car's doing.
And then you have to trust them as a driver that those corrections are going to work.
Oh yeah, definitely. If you don't trust your crew chief and your team, you're never going to be, successful, just because you have to trust them. You pretty much put your life in their hands almost, in a sense, because if they didn't tighten one bolt, it could go really bad. So you have to trust them. And if you don't, you're not going to be super fast.
Now, I want to take a trip back just a moment ago to something you said earlier about pouring the seat, and maybe that went past somebody. You have to have a seat that's conformed to your body, right, to be able to perform properly.
Yeah, so in each car, there's a actual like carbon fiber seat. So it basically takes up most of the room in that car as far as on the driver's side, because it has leg supports and everything else in it. But then You'll have like BSCIs who does mine. They come in, they put this huge, like it almost looks like a clear trash bag in your seat, but then they have this 2-part foam that's actually like fireproof and all that, and they pour it into this bag while you're sitting in the bag, or on the bag technically, and then the foam expands like huge, and it will conform around your body, hug your hips, put some padding under your butt if you need it to like see over the wheel better or to hit your pedals better. And it's a really cool process if you can watch it. Like they have YouTube videos, but like they have to, they almost have to kind of like cut it and like slaughter the seat to make it, I guess, fit you right, because the foam is so hot that they don't want you in there forever in it, because it gets so hot that if you don't have a fire suit on, it can burn you just from the heat.
Wow.
So, it's a really cool process to watch, and then watching them cut it and make it like look really good and form to your body is something that's really cool to watch, because like we've done it ourselves, and like watching those guys that do it every day is like amazing, just to see how fast they can do it. And like they just have an image in their head once it's poured and once they see you and everything of how it's going to need to look, and so they can just cut it and they're done almost in the first try.
Yeah. And I will tell you from experience, if you get into a seat that's not been poured to your body form, it is uncomfortable as all get out.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. Like the Corvette and our TA2 cars, they don't have formed seats, so you move around a little bit in them, so it doesn't give you all that like stability, I guess, in the car, that you're tight in there, you're not moving around. But you're in that NASCAR and you're kind of tight in there, so you're not moving around too much, so it gives you more, I guess, trust in it, just because you're not moving. You're staying still. The only thing that's moving is the car, but you're moving the exact same as the car. You're not wiggling at all. You're not moving around.
Right. So take us into Sonoma. You got the call, you land, all this stuff is hitting you. I'm sure it's coming real fast, but then it's a matter of you get into the car, you pull those straps tight, and it's time to go. What was going through your mind at that time? Was it different than any other time you've raced?
Yeah, it's definitely different. You're out there with guys that like have raced the whole season, I guess, and you don't want to ruin, their points run, but you also want to try to make your mark in the series. You want to show that you're meant to be there. So, you're kind of fighting two opposing sides somewhat, because you don't want to make anyone mad if you like out qualifying or whatever, but then, at the same time, it makes you make your mark that, you want to be there. Like I said, we just had some problems in qualifying, so it kind of sucked that we didn't get to get in. But, in practice, we showed good speed, and I think we could have done it in practice. But, going through it with the team was definitely something very cool, like watching how they do things, and then, how they get you fitted in the car for that weekend, and, how they go through the car at the track and everything. It's definitely different from what we do. Usually, we have sometimes more time off than they do, so we go through our entire car and it's ready when we get to the track. But for them, they're on the road so much, they kind of have to get the car ready almost at the track, because they might get home only for a day. So, it's kind of hard for them to even get much done in a day.
Now you've got that experience out of the way. First time jitters are all done. Mm-hmm. You're going to Watkins Glen this weekend in New York. And so you already kind of know what to expect, I'm sure. It'll be a different place, all that jazz, but the process is the same. So what's your confidence going into this weekend?
Yeah, at least I've run this track, I guess, before. Sonoma I never had. So running this track before is good. It's a different configuration, but for the most part, it's the same track. 90% of it's the same. So I don't think it'll be a huge deal to, I guess, change the track layout on me. But I think as far as, I've done testing on the simulator and everything. I'm doing, like, on the simulator, I'm fast. So I think usually if I'm good on the simulator, I'm good in the car, just because, they go 1 for 1 usually, pretty close, especially with iRacing and how they do their system. So I don't think it's going to be where I'm going to be super nervous or anything. I think I got that out of the way the first weekend. So hopefully, this weekend, I can sort of just put my head down, qualify good, and then it's just going to be all about, getting through the race. To me, as long as I finish the race, I did good because, a lot of times guys, don't even get to finish the race because of mechanicals or, they just can't, like their suit cooler, if it quits, they get too hot and they just can't do it. So, as long as I finish, I'm considering it a win for me and for, our team.
Qualifying, it's you against the track and you listening to what, but when other cars are out there, the game kind of changes a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. And during the race, it's all a strategy game. And, qualifying, you're out there just trying to put one bad fast lap down as fast as you can get down there. And then, for the race, you're kind of like, you want to find that consistent time that you can run every lap that's quick, but not quick enough that it's going to destroy your tires or burn too much fuel. Because you want to do the least amount of pit stops you can because it saves you time. Pit stops are your biggest time loss in the entire race. So if you can eliminate a pit stop somehow off another driver because he was pushing it all the time and you were pushing it, 90% of the time, but it saved you enough fuel to, go the extra 2 laps, that could be the difference between a win or a, not winning, truly.
Number of curves at Watkins Glen, I've lost track, 11, 13?
I think it's 11 for this weekend, I believe.
Okay. Well, we will be looking for you. CW carries the Xfinity races.
Yep.
And it's all going to take place on Saturday. Your qualifying, your practice, and the race, right?
Yeah, it's from the schedule that we've been told so far. We'll practice 9:30 to 10:30, qualify from 10:30 to 11:30. We'll have about 3 hours, and then we're ready to go. 3 o'clock we're racing. So
don't blink, you might miss something, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Austin, good luck to you. You know that Ross County is going to be rooting for you. And a lot of people will be around a TV to watch and see what's going on this Saturday.
Yeah, and thank you guys for having me today.
Sure thing. Austin J. Hill, as you'll see him on the Xfinity Series this weekend. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and thanks also to Kingston National Bank, our sponsor for this edition of Litter Media Live.